Okay, so I'm just doing a quick demo of a scenario that I've run into recently with Power Automate. So the basic scenario is that when your record is updated, I want to send an email and update the status in that record saying that that email was sent. So that's sort of like the scenario. The problem is that when I have a SharePoint list like this and I update the flow, it updates the list item and it creates this sort of never-ending circle where it just goes and goes and goes and goes because the flow is updating the list and then that triggers the flow and it just creates an endless loop. So the way we solve that is with conditions. So I'm going to show two ways to do this. First of all, if you're not familiar with this, you can come into Power Automate, and if you have a SharePoint list, you can just create a flow, and it'll walk you through templates, and you can pick a template. In this case, I just did a custom action, but there's all sorts of options here. But I did one that was when an item is modified. And what I did is I created a flow that looks like this. So when the item is modified, send an email, update an item. Simple enough. If I go to test this, like so, and then I come back here, and let's say I open this up, and let's just say I add some new notes. Okay, so far so good. So it's going to go through this, and of course, naturally, it's going to take a second here because it's a demo. All right, there we go. And so it's running, and I've got my email. All is well, no problems. Until, now it's going to really take forever, but here, in theory, what's going to happen now is it's going to keep triggering. So let's see if it shows. No, it's not. There it is. So it's running again. And there's my endless loop. So it's just going to keep going and going and going and going. And so how do we solve that? So I'm going to turn this off. So the way we solve that is we use a condition. And the first way you can do that is just adding an action and come into condition and just say, hey, when something is something, stop, don't do anymore. So in this case, I want the email status. Now, one thing to note is that email status is a choice column. So while I could do email status here, what I really need is email status value. Again, depending on your data source, if it's not SharePoint, your mileage may vary, but in this case, I need value. And then I want this to run when this is not equal to sent. And then just put that there, and then now these will only happen when this is not equal to sent. And then if you wanted to, just for testing purposes, I could add in a terminate control here and just say canceled, like that. And then go back here and turn on, and then we'll see what happens. Again, may take a sec here. In my previous testing, it just kept going, but if it doesn't, I will make an update here. So here, I'm going to just come in here, and let me just double check, make sure this isn't running. Okay. Sorry, guys. Another test. Oops. And there we go. And off we go. Boom, cancel. So the first one ran, this one was running, and now I have an email, another test, and then let's see here. So these first three are from the first run, and then this is the one I just did. And then if I keep refreshing, hopefully, all right, we'll come back to that. So ideally, it'll stop on its own now, and you won't have any more runs. However, this method does have one major drawback, which is that it will run that flow twice no matter what. So the first time it'll do it and then it'll run again, and that'll cost you 2 runs. And so that may not be ideal for a large scale operation. So what you can do is you can do something called trigger conditions. So instead of putting the condition inside the flow, we can do it on the trigger itself. So here's my trigger. Come here, click on the ellipsis, click settings, and then if you scroll down here, you'll see trigger conditions. So you can use expressions to actually tell the flow, only start this when these conditions are true. So I'm going to use a trick that a lot of people use when they're trying to build expressions, which is I'm just going to use a compose. And this will help me see my expression easier. So what I want to do is I'm going to come in here, and I have experimental features turned on, so that's why my editor may look slightly different than yours. And I'm going to write some code. So the first thing is not. So remember, my condition is not equals. So I have to do not equals. And then I want to use down here the status value. And then I'm going to do a comma. And then I'm going to do sent like that. And then I'm just going to copy this because I need it later. And I'm going to come back up here. And I'm going to do on here settings and trigger conditions. And if I do it like that and hit done and hit save, you'll see it has an error message. So not sure why they did this, Microsoft, but you have to put in the @ symbol. So just remember that if you get that error message, you just forgot the @ symbol, not the end of the world. And I don't need this anymore. Delete that. And I don't need this condition anymore, so I'm just going to put that out here. Delete it. So now what should happen is that when this runs, it will only run once. So if we come here, let me just refresh this. Oh, that's interesting. It didn't run twice. And I'm going to come in here. I'll just pick one and testing trigger conditions. So, and now we just wait, and hopefully I'll get one email if all goes according to plan. And there's my email. And then that should be done. Anyway, so that's just a quick little demo of trigger conditions. Hopefully that helps people if you're working. It doesn't have to be just SharePoint. It could be any data source. Again, the fundamentals are if it's a flow that's triggered when a data source is modified and you modify that same data source from when the flow, you have to put in some sort of condition to break the infinite loop. Here it is. View all power item settings, experimental features. You might want to do this in a dev tenant or dev environment, just because it is experimental for a reason.
It's experimental only in the UI, right? It's not changing any of the base engine behind the scenes.
I don't know the answer to that, so I'm not going to answer.
Turn on and start experimenting.
I would tell you that the reason I like experimental, but what I found out is the fact of they include everything. So if it's half baked or fully baked, it is added into experimental. So with Power Apps, you can go in and identify what you want to use. When you go to Power Automate, you get everything. You don't get a chance to have a la carte. So
yeah,
just be careful.
That's why I only do it in my dev environment. I wouldn't necessarily recommend turning it on in your production environments, but or production tenants. I think it's tenant wide. I don't think it's environment wide. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents there. But it is cool.